Hello, namaste, assalamu alaikum, welcome to Cricket, and today is the 8th and final installment of our all-time Test 11s, and we're going to talk about West Indies, the team that absolutely demolished every side they faced in the 70s and 80s, and then since then, unfortunately, have gone downhill considerably, but their players from back then were geniuses. So let's go. West Indies all-time Test 11. Here we go. We have to start off with the openers, and the two names that always pop into my head, both averaging above 40 in Test cricket, both having over 7,000 runs in Test cricket. So Gordon Greenidge and Desmond Haynes. And after that, you think, oh, fantastic batsmen, great for their era, but also stabilize the ship at the start so West Indies doesn't lose quick wickets right at the top of the order. So those two have to be at the top for me. Before I get a lot of comments addressing the fact that I missed so many brilliant West Indian players from the 30s, 40s, 50s era, I just want to preface this by saying players like Clyde Walcott and Headley and Worrell, right? Frank Worrell, these guys were considered, right? And due to the fact that, yes, there wasn't as much Test cricket at the time, these players played a long time but didn't play that many Test matches. What I've seen is players like Gordon Greenidge and Desmond Haynes be consistent and be extremely expressive and impressive throughout their entire career. So for that reason, I didn't go with Frank Worrell as an opener, but he's definitely in the conversation with an average of like 50 or something. And he played 50 odd Test matches too. So very good contender. But in my head, I just go with Desmond Haynes, but I understand why someone would go with Frank Worrell. And that's a legitimate shout. On the concept of a wicketkeeper, there's a really, really fantastic player from around the World War II era called Clyde Walcott. Fantastic batsman. I think he was averaging like in the mid-50s. And he was a keeper. However, his keeping record obviously wasn't as good as someone like Jeffrey Dujon, which is also why I would be favoring a little bit more towards Jeffrey Dujon than someone like Clyde Walcott. But again, a legitimate shout. I just want to address these points initially. And the last person I want to talk about is not Pat Patterson, who you could pretty much talk about in terms of the bowling side, but actually George Headley, who averaged 60 in the 20 matches he played, over his 2,000 runs in 22 games. A stellar performer, a brilliant batsman. There's not much footage of him. However, I did read somewhere that he was pretty much the Black Bradman. I know I shouldn't be saying that, but that's what I genuinely read. So an absolute class batsman, but it's really difficult to put him into the side. If I've got players like Viv Richards, Brian Lara, Chanderpaul, Clive Lloyd, Garfield Sobers, it's hard to fit in someone of this caliber who unfortunately didn't play that much Test cricket. Yes, he played first-class cricket a lot, which is the difficult thing when you're trying to create this type of all-time Test 11. But these players are definitely players I thought of. I just unfortunately couldn't fit them in to my 11. Just want to highlight that before I get any deeper into this. And then you talk about Sir Vivian Richards, a guy who was so ahead of his time that he never played T20 cricket, and he's coaching teams to play T20 cricket. He was flamboyant, expansive, fantastic, aggressive, but he also had a very smart brain. So he knew how to construct an innings, and one of the best fielders, not just of his time, of all time. So definitely Sir Vivian Richards kind of jumps in there. And then we have to consider Brian Charles Lara. Now, Brian Charles Lara is one of the best batsmen I've seen in my life. Where you had Sachin Tendulkar in the East, you pretty much had Brian Lara in the West. You might say, oh, I'm forgetting certain players. But for me, when I used to watch Test cricket, it was Lara versus Tendulkar. If I had to pick one of the best batsmen between 90s and the 2000s, I'd always think, oh, you've got Tendulkar and you've got Lara. And then, unfortunately, I disregard everyone else, right? Fantastic players, but these two were pillars of their eras. And Brian Lara comes in at number 4. A guy who scores 375 runs, has that score get toppled by Matthew Hayden with 380. And then, like, within a couple of years, he beats that record and gets 400 not out in a Test match. This guy scored 501 in a first-class game. But I'm not talking about first class, just Test cricket. This guy scored 400 runs in one single innings. Absolutely brilliant. And then this is the most difficult part for me, because I have to consider that these two players played in completely different times, in completely different West Indian sides. One player, Chanderpaul, played in a team where he was the best batsman, second best, and then eventually became the best batsman, scored over 10,000 runs, was the player for West Indies, who was a man of crisis. And for West Indies, unfortunately, in the time he was playing, he was mostly the man who just batted in time and runs and everything, because West Indies was in a constant state of flux or some sort of crisis when they were batting. And then on the other end, you've got Clive Lloyd, Sir Clive Lloyd, captain of West Indies, just absolutely outstanding. For a guy batting at number 5 consistently, maybe even number 6, is exceptional. And his captaincy was outstanding. Honestly, the way he played with the opposition was just out of this world. So this is where I'm in a disagreement with a lot of people, but I would actually go Clive Lloyd over Shimner and Chanderpaul. You might say that's a bad decision. Potentially it's a bad decision, but if I've got such fantastic batsmen at the top, I don't expect usually for this team to get skittled for 4 down for not too many runs, okay? So for me, I'd rather go Clive Lloyd than Shimner and Chanderpaul. And then we've got Sir Garfield Sobers, one of the best all-rounders in the history of Test cricket. A player with an average of 57, scoring over 8,000 runs, taking over 200 Test wickets. Absolutely outstanding. He changed his approach depending on the side he's playing against. At least that's what I've seen of him. And I haven't seen much, but from what I saw, the little I've seen of him and everything I've read about Sir Garfield Sobers, he was an absolute gem of a player. For me, he comes in at number 6. And then we have to talk about a wicketkeeper. Now, I could talk about Dinesh Ramdin from the recent era. Unfortunately, none of them compete with someone like Jeffrey Dujon. I can't even put Shimner and Chanderpaul on the side. I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I have to put Jeffrey Dujon at number 7, an average of above 30, over 200 dismissals in Test cricket, a fantastic keeper, a great mind as well, and is able to bat with the tail. Speaking of the tail, you got Malcolm Marshall at number 8. Now, before I go deeper into the bowling that West Indies has had over the years, just check this out. Malcolm Marshall, Michael Holding, Andy Roberts, Joel Garner, Curtly Ambrose, Courtney Walsh, Colin Croft, and this is just 7 names, right, that I could potentially choose from in these last 3 positions. Malcolm Marshall, though, has to go in at number 8. He can bat a bit, but that's not why he's in there. He is a genuine opening bowler. He is absolutely sensational. Over 300 wickets in Test cricket. One of the best bowlers West Indies has ever produced. West Indies' quartet, the pace quartet, I don't know how I can look over them in this situation, but I have to. Because if I've got Malcolm Marshall in there, that means one of my opening bowler slots is filled in. And then I've got 3 positions. Now, this is something people might not agree with. But even though West Indies usually didn't have a genuine spinner in the side, I would actually think about adding a spinner. So for my number 11, I've got a spinner in mind. But right now, let's talk about the pace bowlers. I've named all of these guys. It's so difficult to pick one of them. If you talk to anyone, everyone has their own opinion about the best 3-4 pace bowlers from the West Indies. But for me, after Malcolm Marshall, I'd actually have to go with Courtney Walsh. Now, Curtly Ambrose, fantastic choice. But for me, I think Ambrose got injured a bit more than I'd like him to be. And I've got someone else who is probably taller than him, who bowled many more bounces than him, and was so dangerous, even on the flattest of tracks, right? So for me, I'd go Courtney Walsh over Ambrose, even though that's a dynamic duo that's made in heaven, right? Both of them, the pace duo of Walsh and Ambrose, is still spoken of nowadays, okay? But I have to think outside the box. I've got Marshall. So who's going to open the bowling with Marshall for me? It has to be Courtney Walsh. And yes, I'd love Michael Holding, but I can't have Michael Holding in the side, even though whispering death, right? Michael Holding is so close in this side, but I have to go Joel Garner. And people might, again, say, what are you talking about? Where's Michael Holding? Why is Andy Roberts not in the side? I think Joel Garner's height, Joel Garner's bounce, Joel Garner's deception. The funny thing is, he was not as quick as these guys, but the fact that he got so much bounce just gave him an edge over these particular bowlers. So for me, Joel Garner comes in at number 10. And if I wasn't playing a spinner, I would probably go Ambrose over Holding, even though I really love Holding. But in this instance, I have gone with the spinner. The spinner is Lance Gibbs. The guy who's taken, over 300 wickets for West Indies, had a fantastic career spanning, over 15 years. Sensational. And Lance Gibbs, for me, has to be my lone spinner, for lack of a better term. He comes in at number 11. This is my all-time 11 for the West Indies in Test cricket. Please tell me why I'm wrong, right? Please leave comments below. Let me know who I've missed, who I've potentially scrapped, even though I shouldn't have. Probably Shimnar and Chanderpaul. And do give me your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, take care.